doesn't matter to me.
And me either. What do you got?
I say just do it here. I don't plan on interrupting you.
Fuck it.
Okay.
So, did you want to judge first, or do you want us to discuss points first?
Yeah, we can discuss the points, I guess, throughout. But I will say there was a good bit of contentious value. I would say that right off. It was actually pretty contentious and throughout certain aspects, pretty good. Yeah, because you both get a lot of really good points back and forth. There were certain points through it to where it was just more stronger for a certain opponent, but through most of it was good. So I will just put that right out there.
Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah. The beginning. Yeah.
So yeah, you go. You got it.
Yeah. So the beginning. Yeah, I'll let you go over that first. Actually, I want to hear what you have to say. Actually, first.
Okay. Yeah. For the beginning, so basically the main thing was Minato is KCM2, and Itachi is basically not KCM2, and he's only around below KCM1 and all that. And that was kind of like the main drive Ken had for his whole scaling, was that Minato's up there. He has like better feats in comparison, like to fight the Nine Tails, full power, yada yada. Naruto's like, with his power, he can only combat against half. He is like relative whatever, and Pain, he's struggling with half, and it has all that. Therefore, then you have Minato, which is better overall, and then with Itachi. We kind of see him, and he's like, in the similar ballpark of KCM1 and Naruto and all that. And that was kind of like the main gist of what Ken was arguing for the most part. Just in comparison with it was even the scene with Minato when they're talking about like so fast, and then like it's showing him, and then Gosh is like master or whatever. So that was kind of what Ken was trying to get into for the most part. And then that's what I have for that. But what do you think on that, Jay? Before we talk.
Yeah, so to recapitulate what each said about that point, I guess that round you could say is, Ken was arguing that KCM2 Naruto is the level that Minato is at, and because Itachi was never displayed to be on that level, Ken got out. That's Itachi's not at that level, hence he is inferior. So that's how he's trying to argue for speed and caliber. And the way Shawnobi refuted that premise is he provided, they both provided empirical evidence. Ken provided the scan where Kakashi believes that KCM2 Naruto is Minato. He argues that it's because of his caliber. Shawnobi argues that's because of the aesthetic display that we see. He's very similar in appearance to Minato. And then he also goes on to show the data book statements for the Raikage and how he's not even inferior to Minato, who had a pretty contentious altercation with KCM1 Minato, with KCM1 Naruto, and that was his refutation to Ken. So that's basically what I got from it. But yeah, what do you think about who won that round? I guess.
Yeah. So the only other thing I can think of to throw in the evidence is like, then there was the whole thing like where Minato, like while he was like, because Ken said Minato was fatigued and he did all his stuff with the Nine Tails and Obito, and it's just better overall. And then Pain, he was fatigued and still struggling with half.
Right.
And basically in collaboration, like Pain, is around, if he's around that level, whatever, then, Itachi, then there you go, connect the dots. But then Shinobi's refutation to that was simply as freaking Pain was like extremely fatigued, and like the different levels or the concept of the comparison, it's basically a false equivalence, really. Or whatever, some of those lines, and that's kind of like where that was left off. So really overall, like it's for the whole freaking scaling thing. Like with that whole thing in the beginning, like I don't know, it's tough. Like it's
I agree. I agree.
Maybe we would have to listen to it again, to really get like, because I just don't want to sit here and say like, oh, like Ken got it, like just barely, or Shinobi got, because I don't know. It was just I'm kind of neutral on it, but
So I took notes on it. It was very contentious. Shinobi refutes that Ken uses more like speculative natured premises, and then Ken argues that they're not, and that Minato and Pain were both fatigued in their altercation with Kurama and Kurama inside of Naruto, respectively. So you got to really deduce who had the stronger premise.
Yeah.
It's quite tough. It is quite tough. Then we just got to go. We honestly, you just got to go to the empirical pieces of evidence themselves.
Yeah, we can talk about the narrative, which correlates to this.
Yeah, because neither one went any further in their substantiation of fatigue. I think if one or the other they would have won the point decisively.
Exactly. That's what I was kind of waiting for. Yeah.
So it's rough. It's a tough deduction. Now, if I were debating, this is my own subjective lens, I would argue that Pain was more fatigued. I mean, he flat out more leveled an entire village, fought Sage Mode Naruto, and then was combating the Nine Tails for an extended amount of time. While conversely, Minato was just facing Obito. But
if Minato was reacting to the Nine Tails, like that was like he wasn't even really fatigued at all. The only thing he did was just one flying Raijin, a body flicker.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a flying Raijin back, and he's already like dealing with the Nine Tails and shit. You name it, like So like he was nowhere near. So yeah, like that's something. Like if Shinobi like kind of just went off on that,
he would have decisively won.
It's definitely a false equip. Then he would have probably had that for sure, and then that's it. Ken's done. But there wasn't any substantiation, like you said, for either or. So it's kind of this. I don't know. We would have to just re-listen and see. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's rough. If I had to pick,
we could talk about the narrative, the whole Itachi to Obito, and get into that.
So as far as round, I mean, if we go based off just the empirical pieces of evidence, Shinobi's is more convincing, just because of how the narrative was illustrated. But again, you could argue he substantiated better because of the empirical piece of evidence he provided, not so much his reinforcement of his premise via rhetoric. It was more so just the piece of evidence he provided. But he didn't.
He just had it from just looking at, from A, B,
Yeah, so that's, I guess I'd give it to Shinobi, but you could even argue to because neither one substantiated further. It's rough. That was a rough round. It was a very, very contentious round. But yeah, did you want to go into the next part? The next part of the debate?
Unless like this is also in like conclusion, because I know it's technically the next part, but I think the next part was basically Shinobi bringing up all the scaling of Itachi connecting to Obito, basically.
Yeah.
And there was that whole thing with the statements and whatnot. Basically, from what I remembered from my regard is Shinobi was like, with Obito, where he states, like if he knew everything, he would have been dead. Ken's whole main thing was that's only his jutsus, you know what I mean, that scale to Obito, not necessarily his body and stats. That meaning Itachi would have to use his intelligence or plan in order to be able to defeat him, whatever. That if they just fought head on in a 1v1 fight, Obito is slamming him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's it called? Because obviously you need to scale to your opponent in order to utilize your abilities in jutsu. That's what Ken's whole thing was. And he even brought up the Sasuke moment. They talked about that, whatever. Yada yada. And then Shinobi's thing was, what's it called? Well, I don't think that would be the case because, in order for you to feel threatened by someone or whatever, like they need to clearly have the scaling in order to, like basically what he was saying in a nutshell is like he would have to scale in some stats or be relative in some way. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for Obito to even say that to begin with. It's just kind of stupid because then Obito could just deal with him at any point in time, and then that's it, right? He's just an underling, whatever, yada yada. That was kind of Shinobi's whole thing.
Yeah.
And then he further shows that with Itachi, with pre-massacre Anbu Itachi, not even Akatsuki, he just flat out threatens him and says, "It's not a matter of whatever, blah blah. Like I will kill you." So like meaning if you don't take this ultimatum, like we're about to scrap and you're gonna die. And he had the full confidence, whatever. And Shinobi brought up some other stuff like saying, like Itachi's not one to underestimate people, blah blah, yada yada. Like he's always, very calm and collected, and he knows his limits basically. And for the fact of him to do that further substantiates the whole narrative that Itachi is in a same ballpark with Obito. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll beat him, but he's there, so therefore there you go, right?
Yeah.
And I don't remember what Ken exactly said with all that. So if you remember, by all means, I know you were taking notes, but that's what I got from there. And from my collective lens, I could be wrong. I could review it again. I would say that was very strong with Shawnobi.
Yeah. So that round, I agree. It was definitely a more decisive victor in that round. So as far as Itachi versus Obito, it seems Shawnobi provided more empirical evidence for his point. I think there was a point where Ken was trying to find one. I think he posted one, or maybe didn't find it and said, never mind. I'm not sure if it was this round or a different round. But either way, he did provide less empirical evidence for sure in comparison to Shawnobi. And Shawnobi did substantiate his premise by bouncing off the scans that he provided with Obito, saying, I could have been dead if he knew more about me. Ken refutes it by saying, well, that just means it's due to his intelligence and deceptiveness. But then Shawnobi, I think, did a good job refuting that by saying, well, even when Itachi was a teenager, he still saw him as a threat because he conceded to his sort of pseudo threat when he says, I don't think I can kill you, or I might kill you, I will kill you. And instead of Obito saying, okay, prove it, he just conceded and decided to work with him, implying compromise, which implies relativity. And then he bounces off of that by saying, and as we know, a younger Obito contended with Hokage Minato, by the way. Hence, Itachi more than likely at his best is above Minato. So I do also think that Shawnobi won that point.
I don't remember, unless I'm tripping, and you even have permission at this moment in time to say something if you want, but I don't remember further elaborative on that in particular that you had as a defense, really. I know you probably said something, but I just don't remember exactly further what you even provided. I think what Ken provided at a certain point that was connecting, unless it was separate, was the Zetsu statements where it said...
Yeah. What point are you on right now exactly? I'm on the phone.
Oh, sorry.
What point are you on exactly?
It was when Shawnobi was providing the narrative statements with when he's saying in his mind about Itachi and also
Obito.
Those two narrative statements.
Basically, when it came to that, I was pointing out that the one narrative statement is just Itachi's ability to plan out stuff so that he could have killed Obito, and the other one was not him basically saying.
What about the pre-massacre one, though?
Itachi tries to kill me. It's like, okay, let's work together.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Because
out again.
That's fine.
The pre-massacre, though, because I couldn't hear you.
That's fine. So basically, Itachi threatens to kill him, and Obito doesn't admit that he could kill him. He just doesn't argue against him, which is not a concession. He wanted Itachi on his team.
You were disagreeing with that as a concession. Okay, I get what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Basically, I had asked Shawnobi to show me where he conceded, and he failed to do it.
Okay, yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, so overall, like I said, I could review that part again. I do feel like that was in Shawnobi's favor. From what I was hearing and how it was said. And even from a logical standpoint, if you think about it, at least from my judgment perspective, if you're talking with a guy, you both let's say me and Jay walk up to each other, right? And I'm like, hey, I know who you are, whatever, I've been watching you. I need your help, whatever with this. Can you do that? And I have terms. And then Jay's like, well, what if I refuse? Why would I want to, whatever, when I'm, blah, blah, I'm fucking Madara, right? And then I'm like, well, if you refuse, then we're going to have a fucking problem and I'm going to kill you and I'm going to scrap. And then Jay just becomes silent. And then he just basically, works to do the plan and deal. And they literally go from there. To me, that would definitely be a form of a concession.
Yeah.
That's just my view, but
Shawnobi even says it's an implicit concession, even if it's not an explicitly stated one, which he did say. So, yeah, I think Shawnobi won that. Itachi versus Obito, that was a more decisive round for him. His premise further correlated with the actual narrative as opposed to Ken's. Ken didn't really substantiate empirically his point.
If he did, he probably could have made it more contentious, or maybe
he certainly could have.
Yeah. That could have been, stronger or override it or just made that irrelevant basically. But from what I remember, that's basically it. And Jay was taking notes too. So that'll be for that. I said, the only other thing Ken gave that was corresponding to that scaling was the Zetsu statements with pain. And that was pretty good. That's pretty good evidence because he brought two. Oh, actually, there was two examples. That's because Shawnobi gave him one. But yeah, it was the color one. It was the non-colored. So those were good as well. But I think then Shinobi's refutation was like that's more than likely correlated, indicating to sick Itachi, which would make sense. But and then that's when it got into the whole is sick Itachi really a difference from alive Itachi. And with all that basically being put into consideration and like how that was discussed for the most part, I feel like rationally, from like what was said and what just makes more sense logically, et cetera, blah, blah, that was still in favor with Shinobi. Like it was contentious. Yeah. I will say that it was definitely contentious, but if I had to choose what just made more sense from my collective lens and what I was hearing and blah, blah, it would make sense that, sick Itachi, what's it called, should definitely be weaker and blah, blah, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, he basically is implying that it's axiomatic, but then he does a good job further reiterating why it is. He's saying, well, it's healthy and sick. I mean, the terms speak for themselves. That's basically what he was implying, and then he also implies that Edos are weaker than the prime alive iterations of the Shinobi. He goes on to reference the Tobirama statement where he says we're virtually at full power. Ken says, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it applies to all Edos in existence, but then Shinobi refutes that and says, well, it's the same. It's the same jutsu, so that's by far the most rational conclusion to come to. Why wouldn't it apply to Itachi? It'd have to be contradicted if that's the case. So I think he won that point as well. So I think he does better substantiate that prime alive Itachi's over Edo Itachi.
Yeah, Ken had really good points too, where there is, where he was mentioning like the whole thing where like, with like, oh, well, you have to like basically, this like whether if it's like actually affecting his stats or chakra, this like there was certain thing he was using a lot of speculation tactics, right? And that was really good. It's a good way to approach it. And he was going, but basically of how Shinobi was rationalizing and his, rhetoric and you name it and going about it. And just kind of going along those lines, it just made more logical sense.
Yeah, essentially, to be objective in this debate, Shinobi further substantiated his premise. If I'm not mistaken, even a few times Ken would say, I don't need to prove that. Like, he says that, but you do kind of got to prove that. It's part of the debate. Yeah, like, you can't simply say.
From an audience standpoint, like, let's be real. If I'm sick and I'm here coughing up blood and shit, blah, blah, to the point where I'm not sick and I'm not coughing up blood, whatever, you can more than likely logically deduce that like my body's going to be infected in some negative way, shape, or form, whether if it's my chakra, perception of things, reaction time, it's just kind of like a given thing. Like if I'm sick with the fucking COVID and I compare myself with COVID with, a normal live, version of me that's prime and ready to go, obviously COVID is getting his ass beat, right? In comparison, like it's just not, so like he could have more than likely pulled it off if he went about it in a certain way and kind of like made a rabbit hole for Shinobi to where it made it very, speculative or like whether if there really is a distinction between the two. He had the right idea and he was going about it. I just feel like he wasn't able to enforce it through. That's what I'm saying.
I think that what Ken was beginning to do but didn't finalize and execute was when he said, well, Edos have infinite chakra, so Itachi could theoretically just keep up his Susanoo forever and have the upper hand that way. He could have just said, well, the Edos are superior because they essentially could fight forever, and Minato would just be, due to pure exhaustion, would fall to him here. But alive Itachi, in a battle of attrition, would lose because he does have empirically shown to have not the best stamina. Even he could have said, even in part one when he was less sick, he had trouble even combating Kakashi with one Tsukuyomi. He was already exhausted. If he would have went about it that way, he could have actually won that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Further is substantiating like that. Yeah, like Itachi, because in part one, all that. Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I definitely do agree.
What he did a lot, just to be for constructive criticism, is he says, "I don't have to provide, so we don't see it." Those all appeal to ignorances. That's not a refutation to Shinobi's point. Basically, just might as well concede the point. Like, okay, because you're basically saying, "Oh, we don't see it." It's not a negation to his premise. So, he lost that point. I think we discussed.
He did very good. Like it was just like it was more stronger in Shinobi's favor.
Yeah, Shinobi substantiated more so than Ken did.
And another thing, real quick, just a fun little tip for you too, Shinobi, because there's a point in time where like you guys are saying like whether how fast it is to regenerate as an Edo, like because like Ken was saying, oh, I just think it's instantaneous, and you're like, well, we just don't know if it's instantaneous, whatever. Blah blah, but there's at least a statement to say you practically have like infinite chakra, right? So somehow, some way, this and that. one thing you can say if you're ever put in a position with that is when Minato gets taken by like the divine tree and he loses his chakra, it's actually not instantaneous because he literally tells Tobirama like, I can't use Flying Rising right now. While you know what I mean, like in the cloak and shit, like I'm low on chakra, so it's not instantaneous. We actually do know that. Just an FYI.
Yeah, and another point.
Very fast, but it's not instantaneous.
Yeah, another point that was a point of refutation for both was the Yotamir. Ken was trying to argue that the Flying Rising is a teleportation technique, and that you can't prove that the Yotamir would repel a teleportation attack. He argues that it only repels physical attacks that cause damage, not necessarily teleportation attacks that simply remove you from the battlefield, as opposed to damage. But Shawnobi actually read the canonical literature of the Yotamir, and it specifies all ninjutsu and all attacks will be repelled. So
even spiritual.
Yeah, even spiritual. So that further reinforces the point that Flying Rising.
I'm sorry to interrupt you too.
Yeah,
but two of my points weren't represented at the way I was actually arguing them.
Well,
so the one thing I
believe you were saying, like,
I never
something with like, when Orochimaru
I never stated that you instantly get your chakra back. I said you near instantly get it back. I also never argued that he could attack the shield. I said he could like teleport the Shushino away, which would take care of the shield.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah. So Shawnobi read the canonical literature to imply that even teleportation would be repelled, because it says all ninjutsu, so that would include Flying Rising, which is a ninjutsu.
I think what Ken was saying just now though is like because I would have to go back because I could have sworn it was mainly being discussed with if the shield is being affected by the teleportation. I could have sworn that's what it was, but I think Ken what he was trying to say just now is that like if he touched a part of the Susanoo where it's not the Yotamir and he teleports, then it would definitely work because the negation effect isn't clearly going to affect because he has to touch the Yotamir. Because then you would have to argue and prove that Itachi can utilize the Yotamir's abilities around his entire Susanoo instead of the shield itself. You know what I mean? But then again, from my memory, I don't ever remember that being the case. I could have sworn it was all about it affecting the shield. So I'm a little confused.
I think what won him the point was the piece of literature Shawnobi provided. If you read it, which he did, both substance and spirit and ninjutsu and physical attacks lose completely their meaning before the effect of the god, meaning a ninjutsu would lose its meaning, meaning the Flying Rising would lose its ability to teleport. That's why I gave him that point. Because
my literal argument was he can remove the Shushino, which would move the Yotamir, and removing the Shushino like that would bypass the Yotamir's ability.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get that in the debate. So
okay, that's fine. The last time I'll say anything because I don't want to influence the judges. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because that was my argument.
Pretty sure the Yotamir was being discussed. Yeah,
that was the Yotamir. Like, and then like if that was because let's say that was the thing, like that's what you're saying, which meaning therefore it would take away the Yotamir. At the same time, that's also contentious in a way because the Yotamir is like the only thing that where it's like omnipotent, right? It's like nah, you can't fuck with me type shit. While the Susanoo's like can be dealt with whatever. If that was the case, like I don't know. For me, I feel like we would then engage with that further and then be like, well, here's why that could even be maybe no or yes, and I don't know. That like I said, for my memory and everything, I just don't really recall that. But I'm not. But we can always be.
I don't recall that either.
Doing it if we need to, just one more time, just in case. And if our verdict changes, we'll obviously say something to you both. But if it doesn't, then it doesn't. We can't.
Regardless of speed scale, we'll conclude that because if Itachi is faster, then Itachi could simply just move before Minato could get to him with the Yotamir. Put the Yotamir in front of him anyway. So it comes down to the speed scaling as well. Which did we discuss already? The speed scaling.
That was basically the beginning of it, where whether Minato was two and all, because if Minato is KCM2 and he is above and Ken won those points, then this is technically over because that Minato would just be way faster than Itachi. Because basically Shinobi's whole thing was Itachi's relative to Obito, right, in that threat ballpark.
And he's exactly
like fighting against KCM1 Naruto, blah blah. So basically, once again, if Ken won the beginning, then he actually gets it due to speed and to speed blitz, and he's either sealed, whatever you name it. But if Ken didn't get that, then with everything else Shinobi's been doing so far, which his whole scaling was, Itachi to Obito and greater than, blah, blah, you name it. And then Minato's also within that same ballpark of KCM. That's what Shinobi's whole thing was.
Yeah.
Then meaning if they're relative or basically in equal ballpark, it boils down to their abilities in jutsu. And then therefore Itachi would have the edge because of that. That's what I was getting at Shinobi's entire premise.
Yeah, Itachi versus Obito, I guess, is where Shinobi won that. So he would he would win this point too, because he argued Obito and Itachi are relative. Teenager Obito is relative to Hokage Minato, and Itachi's superior to Hokage Minato.
Exactly. So therefore Shinobi would be taken at that point. So basically, what this really boils down to, once again, if we already said Shinobi won the other previous things from what we just, from remember in Jay's notes, you name it. So since he won that, if Ken didn't get the beginning, then Shinobi is definitely taking this debate, because once again, if both characters are in the similar ballpark and, he's winning that with the Obito thing, meaning which would put him in the same ballpark as Minato is more likely going to lose and be fucked due to jutsu and arsenal, you name it,
Yeah, so I guess our conclusion is the same. I think, Shinobi overall took it. He won most of the rounds. The first round was the most contentious, but he did win Itachi versus Obito, which would prove his speed scaling anyway. The first round was like extremely contentious and rough because neither one substantiated fatigue and pain or Minato in their altercations. I would say overall Shinobi substantiated better, and he provided more evidence and catapulted off that evidence with the rationalization that he provided, while conversely Ken a couple times said, I don't need to prove this or that because I think I won. It doesn't matter. Like, to be honest, that doesn't matter to the audience what you think. It matters what you can substantiate. I think Shinobi won overall. But what do you think?
Basically for the most part, like I said, tons of contentious value, is pretty good, it's very competitive. I would say that I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, it was one-sided or some bullshit. So there's that too. Like, I really do think Shinobi got the narrative arguments. At least he just gave way more reasoning, you name it. I just thought it was more stronger in comparison.
Yeah.
And when it came down to talking about their jutsus and arsenal, like I feel like Shinobi kind of had that to a degree. Ken did give many good refutations to where things is kind of neutraled out and canceled, and that was it. But when it came to the genjutsu thing, really, like, there was all that to where, Shinobi's like, well, he can just still genjutsu without even eye contact and blah, blah. And, and really, I think Ken, like, that's when he said, I'm just not going to find that scan. I'll just give you that.
Yeah,
he was trying to Naruto broke out or whatever, but he just gave up and he didn't want to do that. So, like, if Minato gets hit by a genjutsu, which doesn't require eye contact, which we know he can do, and that happens, and guess what? That creates a time interval, and then Itachi can just Totsuka blade or whatever, blah, blah, and that's technically a win. And so, even when it comes to like the whole genjutsu thing, the fact that Shinobi got that technically, that would put Ken even in a worse spot if the two, opponents were in relative or equal territory in scaling as well.
Yeah, Ken he sort of pseudo conceded a couple of times. Like, I don't need to. I'm just not going to find the scan. He's pseudo conceding at that point, and Shinobi basically wins the premise. Especially if it's extremely contentious on who's winning at the time, and the guy doesn't provide a scan, then Shinobi won that point.
Summonings as a way to counter genjutsu too, but then Shinobi just said he can just genjutsu them as well, or he just scales over those summonings, meaning they wouldn't even be a factor in the fight. So that's basically what I got from all this for the most part. So like I said, if I really had to give as of now, I would say the same. Shinobi more than likely got it and took it. But, I don't know. Like, I could always review it one more time, but, and see, and even Jay if he wants to, just to make sure. But that's basically all I'm getting from. The only other thing I would like the whole KCM2 thing and whatnot, because I don't remember. At least this is me, because I think you said otherwise, Jay, but I don't remember like Shinobi saying that Itachi is KCM2 level, or even Obito or any of that like that. They're all just in like a KCM1 ballpark was what I was getting for the most part, because I think what Shinobi was trying to do the whole time is if he can just get Itachi relative or in the similar ballpark to Minato, then he could just be able to beat him due to jutsus. Am I correct on that, Shinobi, or?
That's part of it. I think also getting him scaled to Obito was also kind of integral because scaling him to that would be obviously advantageous towards my scaling in the first place, you know?
Yeah, it comes down to the round that you and me said is contentious, the very first round where they're arguing like Minato's KCM2. That was basically a draw because they both provided evidence, but neither substantiated their premise.
And that's what I'm saying. Like if because that's what I was getting from that for the most part. Like, I don't think either one more than likely won it because I do think it was still stalemated, meaning that therefore the KCM goes out the window and now it just boils down to KCM one skin. The only reason why I was bringing that up is because if I was right on that, then the only way Ken could potentially have an overturn in this debate is if he got that KCM2 scaling. Because once again, like he just said it, he never was trying to do all that. He was just trying to stick it to what he was doing originally with the KCM1 shit and everything, and Raikage and you name it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So that's about it. So
yeah, that was extremely contentious. If Ken did win that first round, could have won the debate. You just argue that Itachi and Obito are relative, but so what? Minato's above that. You know, he would have won that.
Like,
which he didn't.
Would have had to argue their KCM2 at that point. Good luck.
Yeah. Then he would have had to argue KCM2.
That, dude. It's not gonna happen.
So yeah, but let's give a round of applause though. Good debate overall.
Yeah, that was a good debate.
Thank you guys.
Don't feel
really appreciate it.
Like you did a great job. You know what I mean? You proved yourself.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, thank you.
He did say he was better than you. Yeah, he did say he was better than you.
I know. I remember that. You know.
Yeah, so he had a chance to prove himself. I think he fell short, but
he's competitive. I'll say that.
It was competitive.
But you weren't.
First part. Yeah, I agree.
The first part was very competitive. The very first round, it was very, very competitive.
I thought it was fun, and it was a great debate, though. I think it's actually a very contentious battle to begin with, so I thought it was really fun to explore it. You know, so
to give. I know Ken's not here, but to give constructive criticism to him, I would say to improve, don't let your own assurance of your premise get in the way of your burden of proof, because he did that a couple of times. Like, I don't need to. I'm just not going to provide the scan. Like, I'm just not going to answer it or respond to what you're saying because I won. Like, no, man, that's not how it works.
You want to Jay, because that KCM2 thing, that was a good way to keep going. Like, that's not a bad thing to do either. And like, what he could have done to like further try to substantiate that Minato could possibly at least be, KCM2 and base or whatever, is the whole fucking new manga, bro. He never used any of that. He never used
that. Yeah, he never used that. He would have had a much better time there, man. Much better.
Yeah, because that would have been more believable to even us as judges in the audience. Because think about it this way: like, if Teen Minato is doing that shit to full Kurama, okay, you know what I mean? You name it, and then we see what Jonin Minato can do and all of that KCM1 territory, whatever, blah blah. Then we see him as fourth Hokage fight against Obito, and then basically he beats Obito, and he also had to deal with the Nine Tails and he's dealing with all that. You can basically conclude and have a simple notion that if all that time passed, right, and he's doing this shit all the way back then, he has to be even further, right? Because that would just make sense logically, And you can kind of continue that route to where, because of time and training, and this applies to Kakashi, Naruto, Sasuke, so many fucking characters, you know what I mean? That therefore, Minato has to be either close to that or in that ballpark,
Yeah, exactly. So, dude, if he would have used the fucking manga, dude, shit.
Which I thought he would.
That would have
honestly.
been bad.
Someone said in the chat he said he wouldn't. Why wouldn't he? I don't understand that. Why wouldn't you use the manga?
I was ready for that shit, anyways. To be honest, I thought.
And I'm pretty sure Shawnobi probably had some stuff, to try to,
Yeah, I would. If I would have debated Ken on that, I definitely would have been prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fresh, dude. It's really fresh right now. So yeah,
really fresh. You could literally scale fucking Hokage Minato to Hashirama. And shit, so.
Yeah.
The only part where, cause I can't speak for Shawnobi. I'm not going to say exactly how he would do it. Whether if he would just try to argue the semantics of things or certain things during that whole content, whatever, blah blah. But one thing I can say that would kind of be good for Shinobi's defense if he was on the edge for that is the whole Obito against Minato incident.
Yeah, exactly.
Each on that to basically show oh no, there's just no way. Don't get me wrong, I get the whole team Minato, whatever, blah blah, yada yada, but he's still in a death match with this dude. You know what I mean? So therefore,
exactly.
I think still has changed That would have been a good way to approach.
You simply just could have said, "So what? Teenage Minato was battling Hokage. Teenage Obito was battling Hokage Minato. So what? It just upskills.
Exactly.
It just upskills everybody else. So what you brought up is not that important.
Exactly, and that would also qualify once again for Itachi.
Good point.
Everybody.
Yeah.
It really just boils down to who has better rhetoric and logical explanations, you name it, and of what is the higher possibility. That's what it's just what made me boil down to.
Exactly. I'm definitely gonna give Shawnobi the recording. I'm probably gonna post mine unlisted. I'm definitely not gonna ask people here who won because it's obvious fucking Ken bias here. Everyone's gonna say Ken. Everyone's like saying Ken won. I'm like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Sorry.
That's hilarious.
No, he didn't win. But that was the debate, folks. I don't know if you two want to go in like VC